Gardening for hot people.
Climate change is real.
Save the bees.
Plant native plants. You're hot.
We're all hot. Some of us are very, very cold.
Hi, and welcome to Gardening for Hot People, Planting in a Climate Apocalypse, an unserious podcast for unserious people living on a warming planet.
Which is very serious.
We're your hosts, Cheryl.
And Katie.
Just so you know, on a warming planet, we're all hot. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Gardening for Hot People.
Put on your podcast
Put
voice.
on your podcast voices, everybody. It's happening. So today, we are here with a very special guest, Rosemary Malfi. She works for and is the director of conservation for the Xerces Society. Yeah, no, we've got like top tier guests on this podcast, you know. That's how cool we are.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she does a lot of education and lobbying for our invertebrate friends. Oh, I'm just going to toss invertebrates in our defining terms because not everybody knows what that means. So Rosemary, welcome.
Thank you so much. Yes, if we're at the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation, so we care about you if you don't have a spine.
Mm-hmm. If you do have a spine, fuck off.
You're out.
Does this include... Never mind.
No, include what?
Yeah.
Well, does this include, I don't know, people who voted for our current president? Spineless?
Spineless. Well, maybe we're not. Maybe we're not voting. I don't know. God, this could go off the rails real quick, huh?
It's too early for me to think of funny things to say about that.
I mean, that was a little funny on its own, so you win. So yeah, we're gonna start, I think, with in the gardens.
In the gardens.
In the gardens.
Yes. Okay, so last year when I bought my house, you, Cheryl, came and spotted out all the invasive... you're the one.
It's me.
You spotted out all the invasive things for me, and also I wanted to ask advice on what I should plant in place of those. And I had this cute idea to make a circle sort of garden pollinator city in the middle of my front yard. So I last year had TJ bring a bunch of rocks, and we have this big pile of random rocks in the back of the yard. So I made a circle with these rocks. And I want to make like a little pollinator or whatever. So I started because of you mentioned winter sowing at some point last time. And I was like, okay, so I guess I can buy seeds now. So I've got a cart at prairiemoon.com full of seeds from a list that you gave me. And basically I want to ask, was your list right? And the amount that I have in the cart is this enough? And then after you approve the list, I want to ask, where do I go from here? Like, do I just throw the seeds all together, like mix them together, or do I make piles? So I'll list the list.
Wait, before you start listing, let's talk about where this is going. So this is going in...
It's in my front yard.
So it's sun to part sun.
Yeah.
All right. And it's dry.
Mostly sunny, and it's dry. Yes.
Yeah. And it's like, so most of Massachusetts, especially eastern Massachusetts, is sandy loam. So that's that's the soil that you're working with.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And it's currently lawn, correct?
Yes.
Where it's going?
Not a bunch of grass grows there. It's mossy in this area, which is confusing to me.
It was grassy in the
Maybe
growing
it was
season.
a little grassy.
Yeah. The moss is actually winter is moss's growing season, so it probably looks a lot mossier now than it usually does. Hot take on moss.
Yeah. I love it. I wish it was all moss all year, all the time.
That is possible. We'll figure that out.
Okay. All right. Want me to get going?
Yeah.
And also, do you want me to read the scientific names?
How many do you have?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Holy shit, dude.
10.
Oh, okay. You counted for long enough. I was like, what is happening? All right, let's start. Let's just start reading them off, and I'll say if they're yay or nay.
Okay, purple coneflower.
Yes, but bunnies might eat it.
Okay, that's fine, whatever. Black-eyed Susan.
Yes, but bunnies might eat it.
Rose milkweed.
Also known as swamp milkweed, which is Asclepias incarnata.
Yes.
So The thing about Asclepias incarnata is that it can adapt to drier areas, but it's going to need a lot of water to be established so it can get its taproot down far enough. Okay. It actually does really well in a garden setting. But yeah, you're going to probably want to like mulch well so that it doesn't dry out. And by mulch well, I mean with something like a really like enriched mulch, so not just like bark mulch. I would use like a like Terra mulch, which is locally sourced at Brick Ends in Hamilton. But that's composted horse manure, which kind of functions similarly to like leaf mold. So like that's like rotting leaves. And also if you just have rotting leaves, that's perfect. That's what native plants are used to.
Instead of mulch or with the
Well, so
mulch?
that is a mulch, technically.
Okay. Anyway, so so rose milkweed, good, but I have to maintain
Yeah, you have
it.
to.
Okay.
You really have to water it well the first year, maybe even a little longer than that.
Cool. Spotted bee balm.
Hell yeah, that'll do really well in the dry. Yeah, fave.
One of my faves.
Yeah. No, it's a bee fave too.
Yes.
I think I added something here that wasn't on your list. Clustered mountain mint.
Oh, that'll do well, and the bunnies won't eat that. Okay. The bee bombs and the mints are good for areas that have bunnies, which is most of the North Shore where we live.
I got so many of them in my yard. They're so cute.
They are. It's a love-hate for me.
Well, is there something I can surround the garden with that might keep them out or like satiate it in a different way?
A fence.
Okay.
The thing is like, maybe if you're getting clustered mountain mint, like put your echinacea in the middle of some clustered mountain mint.
Okay.
Because then, maybe they'll be like, ooh, it's all mint, and like maybe they won't realize that there's echinacea in the middle.
But aren't they growing pretty tall that eventually like the bunnies can?
Oh, they'll raise them right down.
Oh, before they get to the.
It was really sad. I had a really beautiful one last year, and then it came back, and all the stems were just
dead.
gone.
And it's extra funny because the way that they nibble, it looks like someone has come and chopped your plants because they make a clean cut with their teeth at 45 degrees.
It looks like vandalism.
Yes.
I guess it still is.
It is rabbit vandalism.
Okay, next, Queen of the Prairie.
So that's what I would call a near native, which is a non-scientific term for something that is close enough, in my opinion. It grows, its native range is literally just over the border in New York, and like borders are all made up. So there's probably some in Massachusetts somewhere. I always figure so there's two things. One is if you're going by ecoregion, which is literally it's like an ecological region that spans what that. Let me start over. An ecoregion. I mean, it's not something that I'm not a scientist, I'm a gardener. So the way that I explain things is probably not 100%. So Rosemary, feel free to jump in if you know better than me. 'Cause she is a scientist. But yeah, do you want to explain ecoregion real quick?
I mean, I think it's just an area where there's a particular soil type. So it's based on, sort of geology and also probably historically what plants were there, and I'm sure a moisture profile as well. I don't know exactly how they define them, but ours is pretty narrow.
Yeah, so where we are, Massachusetts is in two ecoregions. It's 58 and 59. I think we're 59.
I think we're 59.
And it is. It's like these strips, and you can almost see where the glacier may have deposited things in the ecoregions the way they're set up. But so that plant grows in ecoregion 58, and we're in technically 59. But these are very close to each other.
Sure.
And our climate is changing.
And our climate is changing, so these ecoregions are likely changing as well. So usually when it's near enough, the bugs know what it is, I'm that's fine. Plus it blooms at a certain time of year that a lot of our nearest natives are not blooming, so it's actually really nice to have.
So okay. Foxglove beard tongue.
Oh yeah, Penstemon digitalis.
Yes.
That's the one I told you to get because the bumblebee's butts stick out of it and look really, really cute.
Yes, cute. Okay, so next is butterfly weed.
Yes. So that is actually a type of milkweed. And that one, I think there's 10 to 12. I think it's 11. But I think there's 11 native species of milkweed specifically only in Massachusetts. Like there are many different native milkweeds across the United States. And the top 3 that I love are Asclepias tuberosa, the butterfly weed that you're talking about, that's like bright orange, literally adapted to sandy, dry soil. So it's perfect for your area. The other one you already mentioned was the Asclepias incarnata, which is the rose or swamp milkweed. And then the third one is the one that everybody knows about, which I don't generally recommend planting in small gardens because it will take over, but great for fields and big gardens and side of the road stuff, is common milkweed, which is Asclepias syriaca. And that's the one that, like, you know, people are always handing out seeds for and stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, just as a, you know, fun facts.
I got a half ounce of that because I thought I would also line my walkway with it.
Yeah, so it will, if it likes it there, it will germinate. Also, you have to look at the germination codes for these too, because you might need to do some amount of like fake stratification. Do you know what stratification is?
I did want to talk about that because I was reading that in the description and I was like, I couldn't believe they didn't tell me what it was. So I was like, I guess we'll address that.
Stratification is something that needs to happen to a seed before it is ready to pop and put out a root and put out a stem and actually create a plant. So when people say, for instance, like cold stratification, that is a seed that has to be cold for a certain amount of time before something happens chemically in it that says it is time to make a plant. So I know that some of these do need some amount of stratification, but you can fake it. Like it's not as cold anymore during the day here right now. So you can just like put, like if it says it needs cold, moist stratification, you can just take like a damp paper towel and a Tupperware and like put the seeds in with a damp paper towel into your fridge. Okay. And then leave it there for, 30, 60 days or whatever, and then put it out. And then it should happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then anise, hyssop?
Yeah, anise hyssop.
Anise hyssop.
Agastache, does it say funiculum?
Yep.
So that's another one that's like technically a near native. I think our native Agastache is like scrofula. It's like a very long, it starts with an S. It's like a very long scientific name that I always say wrong. But Agastache funiculum is one of those that's like, it's native like just next door. And I think it's prettier.
It's so pretty, yeah.
And it gets really tall and purple and beautiful, and the bees love it.
I was trying to find not only functional for the bees and the critter and the animals, but also find a balance between the aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, and that's totally possible. It doesn't
depth,
have to.
You know?
Totally.
And then I also added more wild strawberry. We talked about how I did plant some strawberry to try to take over my grass. And I thought, what if I put the strawberry around the garden as well? Like in the patches that aren't, like I've got the circle, but what if I put the strawberry outside of it? And would that distract the bunnies maybe?
Maybe. The thing is, everything I've heard from people is that strawberry is easiest to grow from like cuttings or from plants. The seeds sometimes can be a little temperamental, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't get them because it's probably like $7 or something.
Yeah, it's very cheap.
It's worth an experiment. How many seeds did you get?
So some of these I got 1 ounce. An ounce was like $4. It was $1 more than a packet.
So I mean, the thing about buying seeds is that just one packet is going to have like 100 seeds in it. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But then you have to think like how many of those seeds, if you're going to winter sow and you are just going to put them out, how many may get nibbled by creatures or when the ants start showing up, cart it off. So, I mean, getting an ounce, it's going to be more than you think. Like you can open it up and be like, oh, that's a lot of seeds. Because seeds are, especially native seeds, are very, very tiny. They're little things. So you'll be able to like kind of like, like lick the tip of your finger and stick your finger in and then have like 50 seeds on your fingertip. Like for some of these plants.
Right. And then do they go bad? Like if I get more than I should, is it to save? Like is it?
So there's something called the germination rate for all seeds, and this goes for native plants, vegetables, seeds, anything. And when you first buy a fresh packet, those are seeds that were collected last season. The germination rate is going to be very high. That means many of these seeds should create plants. As the seeds age, the germination rate can get smaller and smaller. Now, there are also cases where, archaeologists have found seeds from hundreds of years ago and they still managed to grow something. So, I would never say that seeds 100% totally expire, but you may get slightly less plants as time goes on. Right. So my recommendation is to use them up within a few years.
Well, I was thinking if I got more and some didn't actually grow this season, then I could try to plant again next season with the group that I got. And
if you get a lot, you can also do an A/B test and do your A is winter sowing and just tossing out some, and then maybe you do have a couple pots that you put, in a more controlled winter sowing environment, where we talked about last episode, getting kind of a big clear container and having them protected, and maybe you do both and see which one works better for you and your abilities and yard.
I'll try that and report back.
Love it.
And then my next question is, when I get these seeds, now you've mentioned stratification. Some of them should be stratified, and then some can I just toss right out to see how that works?
So things like the Agastache and the Monarda punctata, the bee balm, those I think are it needs to be moist and warm, and then they'll germinate. But Prairie Moon has a really cool system where they have seed codes, and on each plant, if you go to the website and you go to the Agastache funiculum page, it'll have a germination code, and it's either A or D or something like that. And once you click on it, it'll tell you this doesn't really need stratification, it just needs to be warm. And so you'll actually be able to click on that if you Control F germination code, it should just show you exactly what it is in the info, and tell you exactly what you're supposed to do. And that's why I like Prairie Moon, is because they don't assume that some places it's just hey, here, buy some seeds and good luck. And that can work for some things, but when you're dealing with native plants that need sometimes a lot of stratification and attention, you might want to have that information readily at hand. And then when you get them, they'll actually have a little sheet in the package that'll tell you all the germination codes and what they mean. Okay.
And then last question about the seeds. Should I mix them all together like a little melting pot of seeds, or should I put, dump a bunch of seeds in one spot and then a different type of seed in a different spot?
They do need room. So, and they're all going to be different sizes. And the other thing is, you said that there is there's some area that's part sun, and things like the penstemon digitalis are a little more shade tolerant. So it might be worth looking at what they favor. So the driest spot should have the Asclepias tuberosa. Okay. Even though you're going to water it well as this season goes on, because you're trying to establish it, in the long run, that's going to be the driest spot. So if that's the driest, sunniest spot, perfect for Asclepias tuberosa. And you are going to want to spread them out a little bit. You don't want to just kind of dump a whole package. You'll end up with a bunch of seedlings really tight in one spot, and they might die because they're too close together. Or if bunnies find them, then they just eat all of them at once, rather than another one was hiding over here and it survived. So it's just one of those where you want to have them a little bit spread out. I would use popsicle sticks to mark where you put them. So you can put all these Asclepias tuberosa within a 4-foot square or something, or a 2x2 square, and just dot them around. I think there's a couple different ways that you can accomplish it, but and then if you're going to do little pots in a clear Tupperware, Sorry, there's a joke. It's an internet joke. Don't worry about it. It's another podcast, actually. But if you use your Tupperware and you have pots, like, again, you don't want to like make like one hole and then dump all the seeds in that one little hole. You want to like spread them out in the pot so that they have room so you can separate them if you want.
Right. Okay, cool. This seems hard.
It's not. Once you start doing it, you're going to be like, oh, this was a lot of information up front, but like... You'll get it. I'll come over.
Okay.
We'll make a whole thing out of it. Maybe we'll go live on Instagram and plant your seeds.
Oh, that's a good idea.
That's exciting.
Let's do that.
Okay.
Last question. Very last question. Then we'll
Sure,
move
I
on.
believe you now.
But no, well, this is not about the seeds. This is about, so I texted Cheryl that I was doing this and I asked a question about ferns and you were like, okay, but get plants or rhizomes instead. And I was like, what the fuck is a rhizome? But I didn't ask you because I knew we were going to talk about it. So tell us, please.
That's the real reason why she wanted to do this podcast with me, is just so she could ask me all of her gardening questions.
Yeah. Well, that's a part of, that was exactly what, yes.
Yeah, I know.
That's how I pitched it. I was like, we can go through the evolution of my garden. So it's in real time and, you know, I won't be exact to everybody else's garden, but they'll at least learn stuff about an actual garden that's like in progress.
I hope you guys are learning stuff.
About Katie's garden.
About Katie's garden specifically and only. Anyway.
So what's a rhizome?
So the rhizome, so that's like a piece of a root. Rhizomes are a kind of like an underground stem that sort of like grows and reaches out and then pops up another plant nearby.
Cute.
And so when I say it's easier to buy for ferns rather than buying like seeds, which ferns have like really weird seeds that tend to be really hard to germinate because they're such old plants. They're, by that I mean like ancient, like dinosaur times. And so it's actually easier to get like a clipping of a fern. So and that means like literally just having like a chunk of fern root and putting that under the ground and then just waiting for it to throw out some leaves. And that's what I mean by getting like rhizomes.
Yeah. I didn't even see any seeds available. It was all root, whatever.
Ferns don't really make seeds.
Yeah. So the website that I was on, Prairie Moon, doesn't offer any ferns, but I found a different website, TNN Nursery, where I've gotten stuff from before, and they sell mostly in roots anyway. So I've got hay scented fern for.
Oh, nice.
And I assume it comes with like, you know, it's a bulb of a root. I assume that has the rhizomes that you speak of. Okay.
I'm sure.
Okay.
Izel plants, IZEL.
I looked there too. They didn't
have any right now.
No. And then, so what do can I plant these now, or do I wait until April, or when it?
I mean, with ferns, if the ground is soft enough to plant, you can plant. But right now it's still frozen. So I would wait. Because otherwise you're going to be chipping away at some permafrost.
All right, so that's all that's going on in my garden.
Fabulous. I love it. I don't really have any garden updates besides the fact that we start our season, Plant Magic garden season in 2 weeks on St. Patrick's Day.
And you're not doing anything in your own garden at your house?
Not yet. I'm planning on, I bought this house at the end of last year, and gardens are in need of some help. Yeah. But I actually did do some design work on it.
Oh, cute.
Yeah, with one of my team members. Okay, hey, so we are going to talk about different things that we don't know the exact definition of, so that we all are on the same page.
What the fuck is that?
Let's do that.
So before we jump into the conversation, we are going to define a few terms just so you know what we're talking about before we get there. So, Rosemary, can you tell us what the hell a pollinator is, please?
Yeah, a pollinator is an animal that carries pollen from a flower of one species to another flower of that same species. So it's moving pollen across the landscape. Bees are pollinators, butterflies are pollinators, but there are also many others. So like flies, wasps, hummingbirds, and for some plants more in the tropics like bats. So it's any animal that's moving pollen from one flower to another of the same species, which then is supposed to result in fruit production or seed production.
I love my favorite pollinators are actually flies. because people think like, ew, flies are kind of gross, but they're actually pollinators. They're actually doing a lot of really good work.
They are. I love flies too.
Are
Me
they
too.
doing good work when they won't leave me the fuck alone?
Well, maybe they just think you're sweet. Maybe they're eating the minerals off of your skin. That's possible.
Sweet vegan minerals. All right. Can we talk about pesticides versus insecticides versus herbicides, please?
Yeah, no problem. So pesticides is the broad term that refers to basically all of the different kinds of pesticides. So in the federal law that governs pesticides, it's all of the different kinds that fall under that umbrella. So an insecticide is specifically something that is designed to kill an insect. Rodenticide is something that is designed to kill rodents.
Okay.
The herbicides are designed to kill plants. Fungicides are designed to kill fungus. And unfortunately, there's something called avicides, which are intended to kill birds. Those are less common, but they are used. And
That's so sad. I actually had no idea that
horrific.
existed, but I hate it.
yeah.
In what use case would we need that?
In certain crop scenarios where birds are seen as an economic threat because they eat, the seeds, or then sometimes avicides are used. I do not endorse that method.
I mean, I just feel like there's a lot of other ways that you can keep birds away.
Yeah,
like
scarecrow.
literally just yes, but also like for instance, at one of the compost places I go to, they just have big wires across that the birds look at the wires and go, geez, I don't want to get stuck in that.
Exactly.
And then they don't go there.
Yeah.
It's really that simple. Like you don't actually need to just like murder a whole bunch of creatures.
No, nope.
This is infuriating, actually.
Yikes on
Anyway,
bikes.
let's move on to another scary word. What the hell is a neonicotinoid? You say that one, Cheryl.
Neonicotinoid
Okay.
or neonics.
Yes.
Neonics.
Yeah, so that is, neonicotinoids are a class of pesticides that are nicotine-like in structure, but they're synthetic. And they are highly, highly toxic to bees and many other insects. And they are sort of specifically implicated in bee declines. So I'm sure, well, if folks have heard about pollinators declining or bees declining, there are many reasons for that, which maybe we'll talk about later, but neonicotinoids are specifically implicated in those declines.
So
They're one of the most used pesticides in the world and in the United States.
So, something that I have a question about that I actually was like chatting with my wholesaler about today is that one of the problems that we have is that obviously I'm planting pollinator gardens. I'm trying to use plants that don't have neonicotinoids, but that is actually, it's not possible for me to like tell my clients like, hey, 100% of these plants have zero neonicotinoids because it is so ingrained in like the industry to use them. And I know that's part of your work is trying to like educate and things like that. And they were kind of like, okay, so like, is there like, how dangerous is it if like, in like a whole pollinator garden, like a few plants were grown with neonicotinoids, like how long is that going to affect the garden? Like how bad is this? Because it's kind of impossible not to have like some plants that have that in this industry.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate truth. And as you know, the nursery trade is very complex. The supply chain is very complex. So even if a retailer is doing their very best to have pesticide-free plants, they don't necessarily know all the way back to the origins of that plant exactly how it was treated. Neonics are what we call systemic, so they are absorbed into all of the tissues of the plant and expressed in all tissues of the plant. So that means that the pollen and the nectar, which bees and butterflies feed on, also contain some amounts of neonicotinoids. They are persistent, so in some cases, in some contexts, they can last for years. In the case of an herbaceous plant in your garden, if you wanted to be really cautious, you could cut off the flowers. I know that's really sad. Cut off the flowers like the first year and wait for it to come back the next year. And that's probably fine. Or you can net them off or something like that.
Okay, interesting. So, I mean, a lot of times what happens is we end up planting, and then the first year the flowers don't last that long anyway. So it doesn't end up being like a super big panic, I guess, for us.
And some of the perennials just don't flower like at all the first year. Right?
Yeah, like Lupinus perennis, the native lupins. The first year they're just leaves. So that's kind of nice. But again, that's one that most of the nursery trade doesn't even grow. So it's not one we really have to worry too much about, thankfully. Yeah. I think we answered that question.
Yeah.
That feels very answered.
Sure. So since you work in the Xerces Society with invertebrates, we figured we'd just go ahead and define that for the people too.
Yeah, sure. So, in the animal kingdom, there are vertebrates, which are animals that have spines, and then there are invertebrates, which are animals that do not have spines. So if you're the animals that do not have spines, then you are our specialty at the Xerces Society. So that includes, just to throw out some examples, of course it includes insects, but it also includes crabs and mollusks, right? So snails and freshwater mussels, like those are also invertebrates. There are many different kinds.
Okay, interesting. So does that include like jellyfish?
Yes.
Oh my God. Okay. I actually like always wanted to ask you that question. I'm like, wait, so like all invertebrates.
Right, yeah. We mostly focus on, I would say the vast majority of what we do is focused on insects. We've had a really strong focus on pollinator species in particular, but in more recent times, we've taken on additional work for freshwater mussels because they are at risk of declining, and they're really important for ecosystem health.
Yeah, they like clean the water
exactly
for free.
For free.
Yeah,
Yes.
like you don't. They just do it.
Yep.
Because mollusks don't have capitalism.
To be a mollusk.
I wish I was a mollusk.
Plant talk.
All right, so now we've got a whole bunch of questions for you. So get your learning caps on. Do you want to take it away, Cheryl?
Yeah, so I've known Rosemary for a few years now. We actually did a presentation together, which I like to brag about because I'm just a little gardener. And then I did this whole presentation with like a director of conservation who's a scientist. And I'm like, look at me. I feel so cool. So I've known you for a while. I feel like we've talked a lot about these questions before, but I'm excited to have it like kind of recorded for posterity because people like I tell people about the Xerces Society and I give them these little like snippets and then I'm like, wow, I hope that's right, because like I'm just like condensing like everything you and I have ever talked about, and it's a really robust society. So it's called the Xerces Society, which makes it sound like very fancy.
By the way, it's spelled Xerces.
That's right. Yes.
Society.
It is a baller name.
It's really cool. What is that? Like, how did they come about?
Yeah, well, so I'll just for the name.
Yeah.
The name is based on the first butterfly in North America that was known to go extinct because of human causes.
Oh.
Kind of a bummer.
Wow.
But the idea there is, it was an inspiration for this organization to come about to prevent something like that from happening again. So the Xerces Society, kind of in short, is an organization that is dedicated to protecting invertebrate species, again, pollinators, other insects, mollusks, and the habitats that they rely on. And we do this through a number of different means. So one major way, we have many biologists on staff. I would say most of our staff is scientists. And they are on the ground putting in pollinator habitat, often on farms, through a conservation service under the USDA. So they are out there working on the land with ranchers, with farmers, in order to install habitat for pollinators. Then we also have folks who are engaged in research. So they are monitoring monarch butterfly populations. And they've been doing that for a couple of, I think decades at this point. And they are surveying bumblebee species in different states. And then we do have a pesticide team, which tries to track the most recent research on pesticides. And I am the new policy director and work on policy.
That sounds really annoying, actually, with the current administration / how much of your funding relies on that?
Yeah, so we are, like many nonprofits, trying to figure that out right now. What I will say is that even if we're not affected right now, although we certainly could be, there's a lot of uncertainty with funds that we have not yet received, but we're that have been obligated.
And obligated is like such a fake term right now. It's like
Apparently means nothing.
means absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Cool.
But
Great.
like a lot of nonprofits, we anticipate in the coming years, if this keeps up, that we're just going to straight up lose sources of funding for a lot of the important work that we do. Again, those partner biologists who are on the ground installing habitat that farmers want. It's an oversubscribed program. People want to do this on their land. We might see major reductions in the staffing for that program, or even reductions in the amount of money that's available.
So ideally, if anyone's listening who just happens to be like super independently wealthy, they should be getting in touch with the Xerces Society and being like, call me if your funding goes. Because those people exist. They exist.
We would love for folks to get in touch if they're not already members and donors. And yes, we kind of need those folks more than ever right now.
Yeah. And I mean, you don't have to be like a very, very rich person to donate, like even like $10 to the Xerces Society. Like that's still, that buys, a plant or a few if it's plugs for, these restoration efforts and pollinator habitat efforts. So, I wanted to make sure we plugged that a little bit because this is a nonprofit. This is not like
yes, we're a nonprofit.
Yeah, it's not a for-profit enterprise. They're just like literally doing good work because it needs to be done. I love the Xerces Society.
It's a bunch of bug geeks who want to do good in the world.
I know, I love it.
So you were saying that you write policy for the Xerces Society. What does a day look like for you?
Yeah, so I'm the policy director, so that involves a few different things. And I say it's a new role for our organization, so it's still in development. But part of that is identifying and supporting, legislation or rulemaking changes that would improve pollinator health or invertebrate health, right? So we work a lot on pesticide legislation, pesticide reform legislation, mostly at the state level. Prior to the administration change, we were also, conversing with the EPA about some of their pesticide registration standards. And we also try to inform policy. So going forward, as we enter more legislative sessions going into the future, we catch people kind of on the front end and help them to actually develop those policies so that they achieve what we want them to achieve.
Very cool. Very cool. So as much as we, in the beginning of developing this podcast, we were like, we're not going to talk about politics. It is ingrained in everything we do. And that's just an important thing to note.
Well, yeah. And it wasn't even like we were like, we're not going to talk about it. We just didn't want to like make the whole podcast just about politics because we already talk about, I don't know. I feel like privately we just talk about it a lot already. So we were like, let's do something fun.
Yeah. No matter what, it's
going to creep in.
It's way in there.
Whether we like it or not, because ultimately, just like how like man is not separate from nature, like you can't just like decide politics aren't going to affect your life because you are a part of politics.
Yeah, politics affects the bugs too.
And unfortunately it does, even though they can't vote.
I know.
So rude. They need representation in Xerces Society. It's going to give it to them.
Exactly. We are their voice.
So one of the things that I want to bring up, and what kind of got us onto talking about having you on the podcast was I actually went to an EPA webinar, and I angrily emailed you about it while I was still in the webinar because I was like, cool. So this was billed as like a pollinator focused webinar. And I was very interested to see what our Environmental Protection Agency was going to tell. That's what EPA stands for. And I think they forgot what they were going to tell us, and what the messaging was kind of at a national level. And the guy that they had do it, listen, he was a smart guy, I'm not going to lie. But he ended up being a honeybee guy. And I was like, the honeybee is European.
How dare he?
I was really upset. I was like, this is not, first of all, it's not what the talk was billed as. It was not billed as a agricultural propaganda talk, which is what it felt like. Because as far as I know, and I wanted to ask you about, honeybees are literally only used for honey and for pollinating crops. Like this is not actually like an environmental we're not trying to prop up honeybees. That's like an agricultural issue, not an environmental issue.
Right, exactly. Honeybees they're basically livestock. So we have cows, right, because we want milk, and we have chickens because we want, eggs and the chicken. And
do we though?
Not all of us.
Yeah.
So honeybees are kind of like the chickens of the pollinator world, right? They are livestock. We do need them in our farming system because of the way that we farm. It's here in New England where we have kind of smaller scale, like mixed vegetable farms. It's maybe a little hard to think about, but if you go out into the Midwest or even into the Central Valley of California, I mean, these fields, these are giant monocultures, hundreds of acres of the same plant. So like during almond production, which starts in, pollination season for that starts in February, many of these hives get trucked out to California.
So honeybee hives.
Honeybee hives to pollinate those crops. And then after the bloom is done, then they'll move someplace else. It's called migratory beekeeping. So that is
This is horrible.
that is a business, and again, that is in the agricultural realm, and honey production is also a livelihood and a business that people have. But it is different from, in some ways, different from the ecological problem that is native pollinator decline, right? There's an entire industry set up around honeybees to ensure that that industry continues to exist and that we still have honeybees. Whereas, the things that are happening in nature causing our native bees to decline, we have no control. I mean, we do have control over it, but there's no industry. Like, we have to make changes on the landscape if we want those species to continue to survive.
Well, and it's also frustrating because what I've actually heard, and tell me if this is correct, is that some of our native bees are actually more efficient pollinators than honeybees are.
Yes.
Specifically for some of our crops, because they're actually, like tomatoes are an American crop, like tomatoes and nightshades originated
Here.
not all nightshades, but many nightshades originated here. So our native bees are actually literally adapted to pollinate those more efficiently.
Yes, exactly. So if some of our pollinators are, again, like you said, are better pollinators for certain crops than honeybees are. And what we mean by that is that they're better at transferring pollen. They're better at getting pollen out of the flower and better at depositing pollen onto the flower so that fruit yield is higher, and sometimes the fruit quality is actually better. And the reason for this is that some of our native species, like bumblebees, perform something called buzz pollination. So they grab the flower and then they shake their little bodies.
Oh my God, wait, this is the perfect time for me to show you my t-shirt that I actually wore specifically for you.
I was looking at it.
Oh my God, wait, I'll stand up so the YouTube folks can see. Can you read it out loud for everybody?
BDSM, bees do so much for the environment.
And also apparently for our tomatoes.
And for our tomatoes.
Oh my gosh. All right. So that really answers my question. So ultimately the problem is that native bees are not hive focused and therefore not as easily trucked around for capitalism is what I'm hearing.
You could interpret it that way, I suppose. But I mean, honeybees have been managed for hundreds of years, right? It's a practice that started not in North America, but was brought over by folks who settled here. Who colonized here. Yes.
Stole.
And
Stole land. Killed people. Anyway.
So what was your question?
Well, I was kind of like, well, it sounds like the reason why honeybees are the primary pollinator for our crops is because they're easily trucked around, and maybe native pollinators it's not as easy to like gather them all up and move them to another field and stuff like that.
Correct. I think, so two things about that. One is, yes, honeybees lend themselves to agriculture because they can be managed in hives that are perennial, right? So honeybees are not from North America, and they are actually not very like any of our other bees. The vast majority of bees are solitary, So we always think of bees as being social, right? That they have this worker caste, all these little busy bees. But in fact, most bees are just one female starting a nest and provisioning that nest, and her offspring are then, the next generation. If something happens to her, that's it for that colony. Whereas for honeybees, there's a lot of redundancy built in because they have literally tens of thousands of workers, and they have queens that live multiple years. Bumblebees, which are our social species that are native to North America, only live for 1 calendar year. So their colonies are not perennial. There are some commercial bumblebee companies that rent out or sell colonies, but it's not the same as honeybees. Like, you can't just truck them around that same way, and not at the same numbers.
Wow. Yeah.
But that said, so the second part of that is there's also a pretty good research showing that, even out in California, if you are near natural habitat, right, that is sustaining native bee populations, you can get all the pollination services that you need.
And that is where the Xerces Society comes in, and it's like, hey, we can actually create pollinator habitat on your farm so that you no longer have to truck in, hundreds and hundreds of honeybees in order to have your crops pollinated.
Yeah. I mean, we put the habitat there to support the native bees and butterflies, and also they sometimes serve another purpose, which is to provide natural enemies to the farm.
Oh.
Right, so that
why does the farm want enemies?
Yeah, so things like wasps, which are hunters and they eat other bugs, they can go after the insects that are, crop pests, and that is a non-pesticidal way of, dealing with the economic damage from crop pests.
Interesting.
All right, stupid question coming in.
No such thing.
Coming in hot.
So honeybees and then native bumblebees is what we're talking about. So what is there a visual difference? Like, are honeybees bigger? Are they juiced up? Are they like,
so
how can we spot the difference?
Yeah, but honeybees are kind of like a golden brown color. They're stripy. They're not totally uniform in color, so they can sometimes be a little more golden or a little more brown. But they're pretty standard size unless it's a queen. Bumblebees, there are actually multiple species in this area. They generally are very fuzzy. I would say bigger on the whole than honeybees, and they're mostly black and yellow, and they sort of vary in those patterns depending on the species. But
cute.
Black and yellow. My favorite one is the brown-belted bumblebee, and it has like a little kind of brownish, orangish patch on its bum.
Cute.
I'm gonna have to link off in the show notes to a bunch of pictures of bees, so
Yeah.
that people
We're
can know what we're talking
share the
about.
shit out of those guys.
Brown belted. What do I call it?
Brown-belted bumblebee.
Bumblebees. Okay, cool. Bombus.
Bombus is the genus.
So what does save the bees actually mean? And who defines the bees that we're saving?
That is a great question. So, save the bees has become a very popular term. I would say that a lot of awareness was brought to bee declines circa 2006. Folks might remember, because it did make the news, that there was something called colony collapse disorder. And so honeybee colonies were sort of mysteriously failing at really high rates. And people, started paying attention to the bees. That obviously was a very, very focused on the honeybees, because that's where the problems were being seen. Over time, that awareness has grown that there are all these other kinds of bees, and that we need to really be paying attention to them, because once they're gone, that's it. So I would say there are different interpretations of Save the Bees, and what I would say is that we need to focus on the landscape features, right? The habitat and the management practices, like eliminating pesticides, that will support, all bees, but especially our native species. There's no one out there just ensuring that their populations are going to thrive and continue to exist. We need to do things on the landscape that let them exist there happily. And Yeah, so you will sometimes see Save the Bees campaigns that are very focused on honeybees. And it's just a very nuanced conversation. So there are major problems in the beekeeping industry. In fact, this year is probably the worst year on record for overwintering losses since CCD. It's a new phenomenon.
What's CCD?
Since colony collapse disorder.
Oh, okay, sorry. All right, got it.
In 2006.
Colony collapse disorder. Okay.
Yeah, no, I know you just said that earlier, but my brain did not keep up.
Me either. I did not clock that.
So yeah, colony collapse disorder was in circa 2006, 2007, where we saw, sort of normal overwintering losses suddenly spike.
So this year was kind of like another bad
This was
year
a
for
really bad year. Hives are showing up from completely different parts of the country to the almond fields in California. Some beekeepers are losing like 90% of their hives.
That's so scary.
Yeah, it's very scary.
I also heard they're trying to make mechanical bees.
I've heard that too. I think we all know.
Like robo bees. I mean, I'm like...
Everyone's seen Black Mirror, right?
Like, this feels like a horror movie. Like, I'm not prepared. I'm not ready for the Beepocalypse. Yeah. The robo Beepocalypse.
Also, like, economically speaking, it's ridiculous to think that you could ever manufacture bees in an economical way, comparing to just doing the simple things that would keep them around.
Right,
Planting plants.
Oh my God, I'm sorry. Do you want to protect the environment? No, I'd rather make a robot bee. Thank you. Good Lord.
So maybe you answered this already, but who exactly is defining the bees that we need to save underneath this campaign?
Yeah, so it really depends on who you're talking to. So I think people are very familiar with honeybees. They're kind of like the poster child for bees, and so there tends to be a focus on them. I would say that there are good reasons to have a honeybee hive, and then there are not good reasons to have a honeybee hive, right? If you are someone who's in the industry, or you want to produce honey, or maybe you are a very responsible animal keeper and are simply very fascinated by honeybees, those would fall into the realm of like, those are good motivations for having them. If you're doing it because you think that we need more pollinators in the landscape, right? So, we need more bees, so I will have hives so that there are more bees around. That is not a good reason to do it and is actually counterproductive. So when there are too many beehives, honeybee hives around, they can actually outcompete our native pollinators for resources. So they introduce competition into the landscape, and that is bad for overall biodiversity because that puts those other species at risk. So different campaigns define Save the Bees in different ways. I think through many years of advocacy, we are sort of breaking through, and folks are understanding more and more that there aren't just honeybees, there are all these other kinds of bees and they have different requirements, and these are the ones that we really need to focus on saving so that we have all of these species going into the future.
Wow.
Katie's face right now, for anybody who is listening and not watching. Actually, I'm not even sure they can see you on the camera because you're like staring at Rosemary, just like wide-eyed. And that's how I feel. That's how I feel about these bees and Rosemary, honestly. Wink. So are there places that like we could and should look for like studies and stuff? Because like I know that we've talked a lot about like just all of the different facets of this industry and the bees and all of that, but I do know that there are definitely I don't know if it's people who are listening, but I know I've talked to people who are like, show me the numbers kind of people. So that's why I figure with all of our guests when we do this kind of thing, I want to make sure we do have like some like what's a good stat I can like pull out of my pocket.
Yeah. So for which aspect in particular?
Like for, let's say, like protecting native bee species. Like why do I care about this?
Yeah, why do you care about that? Because
I mean, I feel like there's just like show me the numbers kind of folks, and I get it. Like it's a lot of information, so you're kind of like, let me just like boil this down to like, like in this big wide world of bees.
Yeah. I mean, there are scientific studies. I could give you some names?
Oh, I would love that. We'll link to them.
Okay.
Because there are people, I've recently discovered that there are people listening to this who like deeply want to know the show notes and like want to learn more.
Okay, cool.
So
great. Yeah. So, and I can give you these afterward too. Cause,
yeah. So
right.
we'll link off to these studies. But
Right.
if there's like
I
a
probably
couple
won't
things,
remember all the good ones
that's
anyway.
Okay, I'll write them down.
But so Coe et al. 2015 was a really important paper that combined, it was a modeling paper that combined a lot of empirical evidence, meaning evidence that was actually collected by folks, as well as expert input on how things have changed over time. And what they find is that pollinators are very deficient in abundance in places where they're actually needed the most. So if you look at the map, you'll see like the Central Valley of California is very pollinator deficient. That's where all of our like fruits and vegetables come from. You'll see in the Midwest, which is the Corn Belt, that there is a major deficiency of pollinators there. I think a lot of that, it's attributed to a number of things, but you can imagine just the land conversion that's happened there has resulted in there not being as many native pollinators.
Cool.
So
not cool.
Yeah, so there are what I would call large scale studies at this point showing that not only are we seeing species reductions, but we're losing like what I would call overall abundance of insects.
Yeah, that's the windshield test, right?
Yes.
Like that study is like one that anybody can do. You just literally drive around during like what should be peak bug season, and there's no bugs hitting your windshield.
Exactly.
Like done. Problem obvious, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. All right, cool. So we'll link off to that, and you can share like a couple, whatever else, and I'll just put them in the show notes, and we'll have some more like required reading for folks who are just like trying to learn more.
You're not making any of this up. We've got places. So you're not just like a big random fan of bees.
No, I am a fan, but I don't think it's random.
So a big question that I had maybe the first episode, we were talking about planting flowers to attract bees, and I was just like, how do we find them? So a big question that everybody is wondering, how do pollinators find the flowers? Like if I'm planting a flower that I'm like, I'm doing this for the bees, how are they finding if they're not existing in my yard yet?
Like how are they getting there? Yeah. They do track flowers through scent, so they can smell from super far away. And for bumblebees, for example, they do not do the little dances that honeybees do. For folks that don't know, honeybees perform dances in their hives in order to direct other workers to resources, like spatially telling them like where to go.
Oh, that's cool.
It is pretty.
Over there.
Exactly. It's very cool, and it's like oriented toward the sun. Anyway, it's an amazing thing that has evolved.
You don't have to rush through this part. This is very cool.
It is very cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, they recruit, so which is part of the reason why they're actually pretty fierce competitors for resources, is because there are so many of them, and they're like, hey bros, actually ladies, hey ladies. That's it. Yeah, we can talk about the Bee movie at some point. But yes. Hey sisters, like over here, like there's this really great resource patch, and a bunch of them will go. Like a bunch of honeybees will show up.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they're good at communicating. Bumblebees do not have that dancing behavior, but when they bring back scents, those scents meaning like smells. When they bring back those smells, the other bumblebees, other worker bees in the colony will smell that, and then they will kind of go out and look for
like
those
a hound.
resources.
Like a search dog.
Kind of, yeah. And they do something called trap lining. So they're very visual. So they're honing in on color, they're honing in on smell, and one really cool thing about bees is they see into the ultraviolet part of the spectrum. So things that we can't see. And if you put plants under ultraviolet light, you see that there are actually patterns there that we can't see with our eyes. And bees can cue in on those too. Yeah. And it actually even might guide them like to the nectar, like at that small spatial scale. And that actually goes to something maybe Cheryl's talked about. When you buy cultivars.
I knew we were going to cultivars.
Yeah, when you buy cultivars or even, quote unquote nativars, when a plant has been bred to look pretty to our eyes, we don't know how that's changing, how it looks or smells to those bees. And so that is one of the reasons why we say to use wild types, because those are the plants that bees have actually evolved with. Those are going to have the cues that they've evolved with.
Yeah, so we've talked a little bit about straight species versus cultivars in native plants, and the wild types that you're talking about, or like local ecotypes, which are seeds that are found like directly in the wilderness, like right near you. Those are going to be most reliably known by your local native pollinators. And that's also why if you're in an area, because there are definitely some areas where like you can't find like native plants to purchase. And sometimes all you can find is cultivars. So what you do is you buy the cultivar that looks closest to the straight species, because the likelihood of it having the same smell, the same ultraviolet markings is like much higher than if it's like a crazy color or, has like way too many petals or things like that. And yeah, that's definitely something that I try to mention when I post about cultivars.
So I've got a huge question, a huge, more broad, like umbrella question. Why do we need why do we need this?
Why do we need bees?
Why do we need bees? Why do we need pollinators? Why do we, I get now that we need to plant native plants so that we can survive our bee population and stuff, but why in general, like overarching, why does the earth benefit from this, and why do humans benefit from this in general?
Sure. I mean, so pollination is what we call a mutualism, right? It is a mutualism between the pollinator, which is getting food from the plant, and the plant is benefiting because it is able to reproduce, right? So they both sides get something out of it. Plants are the foundation of life on Earth as we know it, right? The vast majority of plants on the planet are flowering. It's upwards of 80%. And the vast majority of those require some kind of pollination in order to continue reproducing. And even if a plant doesn't necessarily need, like if they can quote unquote self-pollinate, right? Like a fruit will happen whether it gets pollinated by a bee or not. Over time, that is reducing the genetic diversity of those populations, and that can leave them susceptible to disease, which then would lead them to go extinct. So ultimately, in terms of our natural world, which I like to lead with because I think sometimes we spend too much time talking about why bees are important for our food, but I'll get there. They are, in some ways, responsible for life on Earth, as we know it. They keep all these plant populations around. They are maintaining biodiversity. And different pollinators have different relationships with those plants. Yes, there are some bees that will visit many plants, like bumblebees. Then there are some species that will visit just one kind of plant or just a family of plants, right? Like the sunflower family, there's a bee, something called a longhorn bee. You should look it up. They're super cute. And there are several specialists in that group, and one of them is a specialist on the sunflower family, so they only go to those plants. So, it is it's a balanced ecosystem, and if we take pollinators out of it, you might not notice if one goes away or two go away, but eventually it's going to change the landscape.
So worst case scenario, the bees are gone. We've done away with them because we're horrible people and they're extinct. What starts to happen? Like, what does Earth look like?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. I mean, we have flowering trees, riparian plants that are providing erosion control are flowering. I mean, overall, what you would see, I can't predict what would happen because nature often offers many surprises and continues to persist in interesting ways when challenged. But yeah, I mean, we would become species poor in terms of our plant communities. And then circling back to food, I mean, sort of the most, one way that folks connect with a lot is, bees are responsible for pollinators. Pollinators are responsible for about a third of the human food supply. And the vast majority of those pollination services are being performed by bees, but in some cases, it is other organisms. Like if you like chocolate, you should thank flies. There's this teeny tiny little fly.
Go flies. I'm such a team fly on pollinators. I love flies.
The teeny tiny chocolate midge is like the only pollinator for chocolate because they have the complex flower structure and they can like make their way into it. So bees do not pollinate cacao. It's these little flies.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cute. I love tiny flies.
So we need them for food, and we need them because they are, basically sustaining life on Earth, the life that sustains us.
Yeah. So worst case scenario is we don't have food.
Yeah, worst case scenario is
anymore.
we don't have plants anymore to eat, and neither does anything.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Great. Can't wait to live in a silo. Oh my gosh, sorry. Do you guys watch Silo at all?
I know what
TV?
it is, yeah.
It's a nightmare. I don't know why I'm watching it. It literally gives me nightmares.
Maybe not a good time for those vibes.
No, it's really not. It's a show about like the earth is dead and all humans live in like 50 underground silos, and there's 10,000 people in each silo, and they.
Well, that sounds.
Yeah. Oh, it is nightmarish. I love it. I'm psycho. So I like to watch. The world is hard. I like my television to be harder. I feel like it gives my anxiety something to latch onto, and feel.
It could be worse.
It could be worse. I could be living in a silo. I could never see the sun.
Yeah. All right.
But yeah, that sounds like the future that we're signing up for is like toxic dust and gases building up in our atmosphere because we also wouldn't have plants to then convert carbon dioxide into oxygen.
Right.
If the plants can't survive, neither can we. And this is obviously, we said worst case scenario. This would take time. Yeah. This would take hundreds of years. Mm-hmm. But like ideally, I would like my relations hundreds of years from now to still be able to live on a planet.
People in general, like we care about the population of the earth beyond just us living here now in 2025.
And also like I care about like all the little creatures.
Yeah.
It's their planet too. There's some Instagram
It was their
right
planet
now.
first.
Yeah. Well, maybe we
not
all
the
crawled out of the
current
ocean. So we could really get into it. Anyway, all right.
Do you have any other questions for
I'd like to, so I love bringing it all back down to like a practical place. So, number one, is there like one thing or like a collection of like small things that people can do with like little space and time to be able to support these efforts?
Definitely. Every single person can make a difference. It doesn't matter how much space you have. And if you're strapped for time, there are little things that you can do. And if many people do little things, it makes a big difference.
Many hands like make light work, right?
Exactly. So one, of course, is to plant. I mean, we need more food in the landscape. And I think for a long time, there was sort of this framework where we were thinking of natural lands as being totally separate from the places where we live. And I think that's changing a lot where, we know that's not going to cut it. We need to coexist with these organisms. And so planting a garden, perhaps with Plant Magic Gardens, is a great thing to do. Incorporating more natives into your garden is a great thing to do. And keeping those plants protected from pesticides is a great thing to do. If you're using pesticides, most of them are totally unnecessary for lawn and ornamentals. Not using them is an excellent thing that you could do for our bee populations.
And what I always tell people too is like you don't have to like overhaul your entire yard tomorrow.
No.
Like you can literally that one shrub in your foundation planting died. Just don't replace it with an ornamental shrub. Replace it with something that's like valuable to the environment. There are some really, really pretty plants. Some of them we talked about at the beginning of the episode, that you can replace things with. Those ones were all perennials, which means they come back every year and they're herbaceous, so that they kind of die all the way down to the ground every year. But, there are tons of shrubs and trees that you can very easily plant, and you can just do like one at a time. I'll include a link to a plant list for, I think Xerces Society actually has some articles.
Yes, we do. Yeah, we have a lot of resources on our website.
We're gonna link to the Xerces Society resources on plant. I think they do have plant lists.
They do.
So we'll find them.
They are targeting sort of broad regions. So if you have one, it might be more specific to this area. Things that do well here.
I'm hoping that we're going to end up with listeners from all over the U.S.
Huh.
So I'm happy to kind of share the Xerces Society's info this time. We'll always be sharing more plant lists as time goes on. So yeah, we'll see more. Don't worry. But yeah, since this is such a Xerces Society focused, if you guys are on the podcast and just listening, you're not seeing me dance while I talk. It's a real treat. But yeah, so I think that's my main question. We already talked about donating to the Xerces Society, and we'll have a link for that in the show notes as well. Anything else that we should know?
Yeah, I mean, say you're not, well, if you're listening to this, you're probably a gardening person. So, but
fingers crossed.
If you know someone who's not, who still wants to help, becoming aware of your state legislation is also a really great thing. I mean, there are pesticide reform bills that have been introduced in Massachusetts that you could, write to your legislators about and say that you support, not using certain kinds of pesticides. You can also support things like habitat bills, which are trying to, put more habitat onto state land. So there are these other ways that you can contribute to. It's those personal individual actions are great. Focusing on policy and pulling other people in and building a group, that's really amazing too.
Just building community.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, I think that we need to do a TLDR.
TLDR.
Yeah, so I learned a lot today and got very angry about a couple things. But sorry.
Good. No apologies necessary.
A thing that I would have never known was the difference between honeybees and how they're used as compared to native bees and different colonies or species, you said?
Different species yeah.
of bees. And that honeybees have their own industry. That is crazy to me. Learned that what actually does save the bees mean, and that it's a habitat and management practice to allow the bees to exist happily around us. And then colony collapse disorder in 2006 really seems like this is a newer issue and that we've fucking caused it.
Kind of, yeah.
And if that's all the proof I need is that if that's relatively recent. And what that means is spiked wintering losses of bee colonies,
yeah.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Specifically honeybee colonies.
Honeybee colonies.
Specifically
yes.
honeybee, okay. So you guys were both saying that honeybees get a lot of attention, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we should hate on them, right? No. They're still needed. They're still valuable.
I think what Rosemary said earlier makes a lot of sense, where it depends on why you're doing what you're doing.
Sure. Yeah.
If you're trying to support local ecology and the environment and local pollinators, getting a honeybee hive is doing the opposite of that.
Sure.
If you're like, I would like to create more food from the crops I already have, and you have like a decent bit of land with lots of plants on it that needs to be pollinated, then having a honeybee hive makes sense, because you are then providing tons of food for them already. Yeah. So they're not making as big of an impact on the environment around them, because there are studies that are coming out now that are saying like, hey, like honeybees are such generalists, which means they can kind of pollinate anything, that if there are too many of them in an area, the native pollinators, both bees, flies, lots of different native species, then suffer because the honeybees are just like taking all the nectar, taking all the pollen, making it really hard for them to survive. Right. So I always, when I talk to people about honeybees, just as a gardener, I tell people that like it's a little bit of a gray area in terms of like honeybees are bad. Like, they're not like necessarily like bad themselves. They have value for the way our society currently functions, but they're not the bees that I'm specifically trying to save with native plant gardens.
They already have a backing. They have an industry.
They've got
protection.
a lot of people.
We need to focus our protection on the others. And then two other big takeaways for me, which is really fueling my desire to start planting ASAP, is using wild types over cultivars so bees can find the flowers. It feels cruel to take that away from them. And the fact that a third of pollinators are responsible for our food. That's nuts.
Or a third of our food is...
Oh, sorry. The third of our food is being pollinated.
Is being pollinated, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
But yeah, those are my big takeaways.
That's awesome.
That was very good.
And do we have any plant gossip today?
Plant gossip.
Plant gossip.
Yes. So this was my favorite little piece, which I think I might have shared in our Instagram stories on my Plant Magic Gardens Insta. But there was a new plant species discovered at Big Bend National Park, affectionately known as the woolly devil. But its official name is Ovicula guys, scientific names are hard.
They are.
Ovicula biradiata. Apparently a volunteer and a park ranger came across this fuzzy looking plant in the northern stretches of the park in March 2024, and they didn't recognize it. Now it's been like officially decided that it's actually like a new plant that we didn't know about, which is just always exciting to me, that, you know, there are still things we don't know about the earth, and there are new things popping up all the time. And I also wanted to bring up this little piece of plant gossip because a park ranger found this. And currently, our national parks are under serious attack by this administration. They're firing somewhere around 1,000 park rangers. And those are the people that make sure you don't get mauled by a moose or a bison. Those are the people who make sure that our parks are not covered in trash. These are the people who keep you safe, keep the environment safe, and who discover brand new species with, you know, and they also manage volunteers. So the less park rangers you have, the less people you have to manage volunteers in these spaces, and
So
protect.
this could have been the very last plant ever discovered.
Yeah, I mean,
now that we...
well, people are just overworked now, and they're not going to have as much time to maybe like do this sort of thing. And the other little really fun piece of news is that Trump has decided through executive order that he's going to be taking like 280 acres of lumber out of our parks, just because, I don't know, the bottom line, I guess. And this is important, and I don't even think it's political. It's that these parks belong to us, like the citizens. Like, these are our parks. This is not like a place for him to just be able to go in and just like take a bunch of lumber without regard for how this might affect endangered species, how this might affect the habitat, how this might affect your drinking water. Just arbitrarily clear cutting can actually cause really huge issues with drinking water, because you no longer have like these robust environments and root systems filtering water that's getting down to rivers, that's getting down to water treatment plants. You know, everything kind of filters down to the same places. So it's really heartbreaking. Call your reps, get really mad about it, and you know, do everything you can. Anyways, plant gossip was like kind of fun and kind of not today. We're gonna go back to just a little fun upper at the end here, and we're gonna have Rosemary do our hot or not segment.
Hot.
Or not.
Yeah, so Rosemary, hot or not honeybees?
Lukewarm.
I know, given the conversation we just had,
Yes, lukewarm.
We can't call them not hot.
Yeah, I mean, and they are really cool. Like I know why people are fascinated by them. They're really their social structure is amazing. Their biology is amazing. So yeah, they are cool, but also, you know, part of a not very functional agricultural system.
Sure. Yeah. All right. How about a spotted lanternfly?
They're pretty, but not.
Not hot.
Not for our area.
I know.
Any
I know.
notes
They're
on
very,
that?
very damaging.
They're an invasive species in the United States.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they're really making their way across the eastern coast.
Yeah, they're destroying trees, and yeah. Anyway, they're moving very fast. They were not in Massachusetts just a couple years ago, and now
they
I
are
think
now.
they've been spotted now.
Last
No
season.
pun intended.
Hate that. And last one, bumblebees, hot or not?
Hottest.
Hottest.
Bombus. I don't know. I just love it. It's the scientific family. It's a
Yeah,
genus.
a genus, yeah.
Genus. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the genus name for bumblebees. It's
Yeah.
Bombus. And it just, I mean, it's like one half of bombastic. So
Exactly.
I'm just like, I feel like it's so funny to me.
They kind of. I mean, I studied bumblebees for a long time, before coming to the Xerces Society, before doing policy work, and they are just so charismatic. I mean, the different species are just completely different colors, are beautiful, but also like on a personal level. I know this is going to sound weird, but they actually kind of have personalities. Like the different colonies that we would rear for our field experiments, like they had different personalities. There
That's
were some that were real
adorable.
mean, which was fair because
It's fair.
Live your life.
they were being in a
They
they were in a field
deserve to be
experiment.
mean girls.
Yes.
I support bees' wrongs as well as their rights.
Yes.
One last question I have for you is a very important one. Is your house covered in bee decor?
Kinda. Yeah. That's which was sort of no fault of my own. I think
Of course.
she's like, oh, it's the bee lady. You
Yeah.
know, give her some bee stuff.
It's like when cat fans, like everybody thinks they want cat shirts and decor. And I'm like, no, I don't want this.
You literally got me a
looking
cat
white
sweatshirt.
Okay, well, I'm coming around to it.
And you got yourself one that matches.
I have started in liking cat decor, but it got better. That's the thing.
decor got better.
The decor got better, yeah.
Oh,
the
yeah.
merch.
The millennials
cat merch.
turned into the
Yeah.
creative directors.
Yes,
Now
yes,
we've
yes.
just got better cat decor because of it, you know?
I mean, bee decor is everywhere. It seems like it's always coming back, like the style of decorating with bees.
yeah, I know. I've noticed that it's appearing in like fabric patterns and showing. For me, it seems like it's showing up in unusual places, which is good. I guess that means it's its own form of awareness.
If you have any pictures of your bee decor, please send them to us because I feel like we should make a post. 'Cause I think that sounds really cute. All right, so I think we're going to wrap this puppy up. I think we're going to talk a little bit about just the stuff that we have coming up, and then we'll see you next time.
Yeah, so I've got a couple of vegan markets coming up. We've got the Vegan Mini Market on April 12th at Bridge 9 in Beverly, Massachusetts. And then we've got another one on May 10th at Odell Veterans Park in Beverly. And how about you, Cheryl?
Every single weekend right now at J.C. Phillips Forest in Beverly, we're meeting at the community garden parking lot that's kind of like right next door at Moraine Farm, and we're chopping down invasive plants. And as the season warms, we're going to be digging out the root balls of these plants as well. And we've got a decent chunk of the woods already chopped. It's really impressive, actually. The volunteers are wild people.
And so this is
they
every
go for
weekend?
it. This is every weekend. So on Saturdays, we're there 10 to 11:30, and then on Sundays, we're there 11 to 12:30. I'm there on Sundays. I like to sleep in on Saturdays if I can, one day a week.
Gotta have one day off.
And then I also have garden designs for sale on the plantmagic.com. If you're a person that just needs something to work from, and you're like, I don't have a budget to like hire a native gardener to do all this stuff for me, the packet that you get has the design, the plant list, some recommendations for where to get plants online, how to actually make the garden bed so that you're not just like, I have plants and now what? But yeah, so I put those together. I hope people like them.
And it's a freaking steal. Everybody should be buying these.
Yeah.
$100 for a whole design outline.
Well,
It's insane.
They're probably going to go on sale for spring too. Like I'm probably going to have a discount
yeah.
code at some point. So if you're like, I don't know, I still don't want to pay $100, then just like wait, like I don't know, a month. I'll have a discount code next episode.
And Rosemary, do you have anything going on that you can tell the people about?
Yeah, we have webinars. I mean, a lot of the time. So if you go to our website, you can find a variety of subjects. We are frequently doing everything from talking about, bumblebee biology to talking about how to improve, your pesticide practices at home. So we have a lot of practical advice via those webinars. So I encourage you to go to the website to see which ones are coming up. And I also let folks know, something that we're involved in right now is the petition the proposal to list the monarch butterfly as a threatened species under the Endangered Species Act. We have a public sign-on letter, and we can link to that in the resources. And it would be great just for you to sign on. The public comment period is closing March 12th, so you still have time to say, yeah, we agree with this listing. Let's protect this really valuable and iconic species.
Is this sort of like a petition?
It's a sign-on letter, which we are then going to submit on behalf of all people who sign it to the Fish and Wildlife Service, and it will go into public record.
Cool. Anything else?
I don't think so. Thank you, Rosemary, so much.
Thank you for having me.
This was Rosemary Malfi, Director of Conservation for the Xerces Society. And we're just super thankful that you made the time to come hang out with us. Really appreciate it.
I learned a lot here today. I'm going to move forth with a new appreciation for bees for sure.
Fabuloso.
I already love them.
Yeah.
Because I'm vegan. No.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
For sure. All right. So you can find us on Instagram at Gardening for Hot People. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen and sign up for our newsletter at gardeningforhotpeople.com. You can shoot us an email at gardeningforhotpeople@gmail.com. And we'd like to thank Willow McKenna for the music and BevCam for our production space today. And thank you to us.
Because we're great.
Go us and Rosemary. And bees. Save the bees.
Go bees. We had to go to the bathroom. We had to go piss girl.
What?
You not heard?
Why are you saying that? What?
It's a meme.
Oh. I've
It's
not
a
seen it.
Gossip Girl, and then you switch it all around.
I
It's
never
Go Piss
watched
Girl.
that show, Gossip Girl. I wasn't into gossip as much then as I am now. Maybe I should watch it.
For shame.